Disaster at Capital One Arena. Our most lethal offensive weapon might be out until December. Can we survive without him? The clock is ticking. The trade deadline blows up on Tuesday, and the game against Seattle decides everything. Will Peters risk the future for a star edge rusher? But hold up. Desperation just forced us to throw into the fire a former first-round pick. This Sunday is his last shot. Will he be a hero or the bust that Tennessee buried? If you're not subscribed, you're missing the key that could define our season. After years of watching this team struggle, we finally had hope with a competitive roster. We had our number one receiver healthy. We had chemistry. We had momentum. And then came that damn quad injury against the Chiefs. I was there. You were there. We all saw Terry grab his leg. And in that moment, I told you, this didn't look good. But what Ian Rapoport just revealed is absolutely devastating for our hopes this season. I'm telling you this, Terry McLaurin isn't just missing the game against Seattle this Sunday. No way. According to Rapoport, my understanding is he's also going to miss next week against Detroit. But here's the real kicker. He might miss the third game too, against Tampa Bay. Then we've got a bye. So there's a real chance Terry McLaurin misses more games for Washington. Do you realize how massive that is? We're talking about our all-pro receiver, the guy who's been Iron Man since he got here in 2019, possibly being out until December. And you know what's the most frustrating part? Terry has only played 4 games this season. FOUR, after all that contract drama in the offseason, after we finally got a deal done, after we all thought, okay, now we're going to see the real Terry. Turns out he's going to miss more than half the season. I ask you, how is this team supposed to compete without its most dangerous offensive weapon? How are our quarterbacks supposed to succeed without that safety blanket Terry provides? Now, I get it, injuries are part of the game. But the frequency and severity of the issues Washington is facing this year have been insane. It's not just Terry. It's Noah, Brown on IR. It's the offensive line being torn apart. It's the secondary held together with duct tape. And now, losing Terry for potentially another month, that's not just a hit to the roster. It's a hit to the soul of this team. Remember when Terry came in as a third-round pick in 2019? Nobody expected him to become what he did. Season after season, no matter who the quarterback was, no matter how bad the team was, Terry always showed up. Dwayne Haskins, Alex Smith, Taylor Heinicke, Carson Wentz, Sam Howell, it didn't matter. Terry produced. And now, just when we finally have a serious organization with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, just when we finally have a long-term plan, our leader in the wideout room is in the rehab room. I think this explains a lot about why Adam Peters was so cautious with that contract in the offseason. It's not that he didn't value Terry. It's that he knew paying top dollar to a receiver entering the back half of their prime is risky. And look, I'm not saying Terry's declining in talent, but injuries don't lie. This is the first time in his career he's dealing with a long-term absence, and that has to concern the front office. But here's what's really got me worried. Ian Rapoport said Washington might shut Terry down until after the bye week. That word, might, tells me the team is seriously considering going ultra-conservative. And I ask you now, is that the right call? On one hand, you've got to protect your investment. Terry signed a big deal, and you can't risk a minor injury turning into something career-altering. On the other hand, this team is fighting to stay alive in the NFC, and every game matters. Terry's impact goes way beyond stats. Yeah, he's our most productive receiver. Yeah, he's the guy who can flip a game with one play. But what doesn't show up on the stat sheet is his leadership. It's his presence in the locker room. It's how the young guys look up to him. It's how the quarterbacks trust him on 3rd and long. All of that disappears when he's not on the field. So now I ask you, what does this mean for the rest of the season? If Terry really is out until after the bye, we're looking at a possible return in week 13 or 14. By then, depending on how these next few games go, we could be completely out of the playoff race. Or if we manage to stay competitive, Terry could come back just in time for a final push. But that's a big if. Here's the reality. Washington has to find a way to survive without Terry McLaurin. There's no other option. You can't just throw in the towel and say, well, we'll wait for next year. This organization has preached always battle, and now it's time to prove it. Other receivers have to step up. The run game has to be more consistent. The defense has to force more turnovers. No excuses. I'm telling you this. If there's a silver lining in all this, it's that when Terry comes back, he'll be fully healthy. He won't be that guy playing at 70 or 80% trying to gut it out. He'll be 100% fresh and ready to dominate down the stretch. But for that to matter, Washington has to stay alive in the playoff hunt over the next few weeks. Do you think this team can survive without Terry McLaurin until December? Or is this the end of our playoff hopes this season? If that's got you worried, wait until you hear what Adam Peters is considering doing in the next 48 hours. When you think about everything we've been through as Commanders fans over the years, the trade deadline has always been a moment of either hope or heartbreak. Remember when we brought in Marshon Lattimore? When we shipped out Chase Young and Montez Sweat? Those moves shaped entire seasons. And now, with the November 4th deadline coming up fast, Adam Peters has to make a critical decision: buy, sell, or stand pat. According to Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated, nobody around the league thinks Washington should stand pat. And I totally agree. But here's the dilemma. Which direction do you go? Do you go all in trying to save this season? Or do you accept that things haven't gone as planned and start stacking picks for the future? I'm telling you this. Sunday night's game against Seattle is absolutely crucial in deciding which path Peters takes. If Washington comes out and handles the Seahawks, if the defense shows up, if the offense finds rhythm without Terry McLaurin, then you can justify making a move to buy talent. But if we lose, if we look sloppy, if it's clear this team isn't ready to compete this year, then you seriously have to consider selling off pieces that aren't part of the long-term vision. Breer specifically mentioned that Washington could use help at edge rusher. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. We desperately need help there. Our pass rush has been hit or miss all season. Sure, we've had flashes, but we don't have that one dominant edge guy who can take over a game. And when I look around the league, I see some names out there. The Miami Dolphins have Bradley Chubb, Matthew Judon, and Yellen Phillips. The New York Jets have Will McDonald IV and Jermaine Johnson II. All of those guys are reportedly available, according to Breer. But what's the price? What kind of picks will we have to give up? And is it worth making that investment if Terry McLaurin won't be back until December? Now here's where it gets interesting. Breer also said there are teams interested in some of Washington's players. Specifically, he mentioned Javon Kinlaw and Deebo Samuel as guys who could draw interest. And I ask you, does it make sense to move either of them? Kinlaw is under contract for multiple seasons and has been solid in the middle of our D-line. Not a superstar, but solid. Why move him unless someone makes you an offer you can't refuse? And as for Deebo Samuel, look, I get the argument. He's only under contract for this year, and with all the injuries in the wide receiver room, can you really afford to let him go? That would basically be waving the white flag on the season. And that goes completely against the always battle mindset this organization has embraced since Peters and Quinn took over. I think the only real option for Washington is to buy, but it has to be smart. You can't mortgage the future for a season that's already on shaky ground. You've got to find that balance between improving the roster now and keeping flexibility for the future. And that's not easy. Let me give you an example of how this could work. Let's say Washington goes after Matthew Judon from Miami. He's a vet. He's been productive when healthy, and he won't cost you a first-round pick. Maybe a third or a fourth. That's the kind of move that makes sense. You boost your pass rush immediately without giving up too much draft capital, but here's the problem. What if you make that move, and then Terry doesn't come back until December? What if the offense keeps struggling because you don't have your weapons? Then you just spent a pick on a guy who didn't help you reach the playoffs. And that's exactly the kind of decision that can cost a GM their job. Now, Breer also mentioned some offensive names that might be available. David Nuku from Cleveland, Chigo Okonkwo from Tennessee, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed from New Orleans. All tight ends or receivers who could help replace some of Terry's production. But here's my question. Do you really believe any of those guys can come in and replicate what Terry brings to this offense? I'm telling you this. Chris Olave is the only name on that list that really excites me. He's young, he's talented, and if New Orleans is willing to move him, that means they're going into rebuild mode. But what would Washington have to give up? Probably at least a first rounder, maybe more. And that's where you've got to ask yourself, is it worth it? The truth is, the results of Week 9 are going to have a massive impact on every move that gets made or doesn't at the deadline. The Jets and Browns are on bye this weekend, so we don't have any new info on their situations. But the Dolphins already played and lost to Baltimore. The Saints are visiting the Rams, and the Titans are hosting the Chargers. And you know what that tells me? It tells me there are going to be several teams in seller mode after this weekend. If the Saints lose to the Rams, do you really think they're going to hang on to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed? No way. They'll be looking to stockpile picks. Same with the Titans if they lose to the Chargers. But here's what's really got me thinking. Albert Breer mentioned that Washington has been involved in big trades at recent deadlines. Marshon Lattimore, Chase Young, Montez Sweat. All those moves impacted the defense. And according to Breer, that's probably where another move would happen, if any. So I ask you now, is defense really our biggest need? Yeah, we need help on the edge. But when I look at this roster, when I see Terry out, when I see Noah Brown on IR, when I see our offense struggling to move the ball consistently, shouldn't we be prioritizing offensive help? I think Peters is in an impossible spot. No matter what he does, there's going to be criticism. If he buys and it doesn't work, they'll say he mortgaged the future. If he sells, they'll say he gave up too soon. If he stands pat, they'll say he didn't do enough to help the team. There's no right answer here, but let me tell you what I'd do if I were Adam Peters. I'd make a small move to improve the edge rush. Something like Matthew Judon for a 3rd or 4th round pick. That boosts your defense without costing too much. And then I'd stand pat on offense. Why? Because you can't replace Terry McLaurin with a trade. You just can't. Better to wait for him to come back healthy and build around that. Now. If Washington goes out and dominates Seattle this Sunday, if the offense looks good without Terry, if the defense creates pressure and turnovers, then maybe I change my mind. Maybe in that case you go more aggressive and try to bring in someone like Chris Olave, but it has to be a dominant win, not a close game where you barely survive. And you know what's the craziest part of all this? The deadline is November 4th. That's Tuesday, 2 days after the game against Seattle. So Peters is going to have to make a decision based on one game. One game to decide if this team is a buyer or a seller. That's wild. But that's the NFL. There's no time to hesitate. No time for second guesses. You've got to trust your evaluation, trust your staff, and make a call. And whatever decision Peters makes, it's going to shape how we view the rest of the season. Do you think Peters should buy or sell at the trade deadline? Or do you think he should stay put and trust the current roster? And just when you thought we were done talking roster moves, let me tell you about a player who just got thrown into the fireway earlier than expected. If you thought Treylon Burks was going to get time to settle into Washington's system, learn the playbook, and build chemistry with the quarterbacks, you couldn't be more wrong. The injury to Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown's absence have forced the Commanders to bump Burks up to the active roster way sooner than anyone expected. And now, this former first-round pick from the Tennessee Titans is walking into the last chance saloon, trying to revive a career that never really took off after years of watching talented players flop in Tennessee and then find success elsewhere. I had hoped that Burks could be one of those stories. The guy has all the physical tools. 6'3", 225 pounds, ran a 4.55 in the 40 at his pro day. At Arkansas, this dude was unstoppable. But in Tennessee, it just never clicked. I'm telling you this, when the Titans drafted him in the first round back in 2022, the expectation was that he'd replace A.J. Brown, who had just been traded to Philly. That's a massive load to put on a rookie. A.J. Brown is an all-pro receiver, one of the best in the league. And they expected a 21-year-old kid to fill those shoes right away. That's not fair. But here's the thing. Burks didn't just fail to replace A.J. Brown, he didn't even come close. In 2.5 seasons with Tennessee, he only had 53 catches for 699 yards and 1 touchdown. For a first-round pick, that's just not acceptable. And it wasn't just a lack of production. It was the injuries. A broken collarbone this year. Turf toe issues. He just couldn't stay healthy, so the Titans cut him. And when that happened, I told you, someone's going to give him a shot. Because the talent is there. The physical tools are there. He just needs the right system and the right coaching. And apparently, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn believe Washington is that place. But here's what's got me intrigued. Burks has been with the Commanders for less than 2 weeks. 2 weeks to learn a brand new playbook. 2 weeks to build timing with the quarterbacks. 2 weeks to understand protections, routes, adjustments. And now, they're throwing him into the fire against Seattle on Sunday Night Football, a game that could decide the direction of the entire season. Do you think that's fair to Burks? I ask you, how is he supposed to succeed in that situation? The answer is, he probably can't. But that doesn't mean he shouldn't try. Think Cliff Kingsbury has to be really smart about how he uses Burks. You can't ask him to run the full route tree. You can't expect him to make complex adjustments in coverage. You've got to keep it simple. Give me go routes. Give me slants. Give me screens. Plays that lean into his physical strengths without asking him to overthink. Because here's the reality. Burks has the speed to stretch the field vertically. That's something Washington doesn't have right now without Terry McLaurin. Olamide Zakos is solid, but he's not a true deep threat. Jahan Dotson has speed, but he hasn't been consistent. Dyami Brown is more of a complementary piece than a primary weapon. Burks, if he can stay healthy and locked in, could give this offense a vertical threat it's been missing. But let me be clear. Expecting miracles from Burks right away is unfair. The guy barely knows the playbook. He barely knows his teammates. And he's coming from a situation in Tennessee where he clearly lost confidence. You can't just flip a switch and expect him to suddenly become the receiver. Everyone thought he'd be coming out of Arkansas. Now, let me ask you something. What if Burks actually delivers? What if he goes out against Seattle and puts up 4 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown? What if he becomes that vertical weapon this offense desperately needs? Suddenly, Terry's absence doesn't feel quite as crushing. Suddenly, you've got a young piece with upside that you can develop. But here's the flip side. What if he flops? What if he can't get separation? What if he makes mental mistakes that cost the team? Then you're right back where you started scrambling for help in the wide receiver room. I'm telling you this. Burks' situation is fascinating because it represents everything that's wrong and everything that could go right with this Commanders season. There's the potential for a talented player to finally find the right system and live up to his promise. But there's also the risk that he's just another guy who couldn't. Adapt another first-round pick who turned into a bust. The pressure on Burks is massive. He knows it. Everyone knows it. This is probably his last shot in the NFL. If it doesn't work in Washington, if he can't produce when given the chance, who's going to give him another opportunity? Not many teams, but here's what gives me hope. Burks shouldn't be lacking urgency or motivation. The guy got cut. That stings. That humbles you. And now he's got a chance to prove Tennessee made a mistake. He's got a chance to shut up every doubter, including me, who thought his career was done. And you know what else gives me hope? The fact that Adam Peters signed him. Peters has proven to be one of the best talent evaluators in the league. If he sees something in Burks, if he believes this guy can help the team, then I've got to trust that judgment. Not blindly, but I've got to give it the benefit of the doubt. Now, let me talk about Burks' physical tools because they're legit. At 225 pounds, this guy can play physical against defensive backs. He can win contested catches. He can break tackles after the catch. At Arkansas, he regularly turned short receptions into big gains because defenders just couldn't bring him down. But here's the problem. The NFL ain't the SEC. The DBs in the league are bigger, faster, smarter. You can't just rely on raw athleticism. You've got to have technique. You've got to have football IQ. And those are the areas where Burks has struggled. I think if Washington can simplify Burks' role, if they can put him in spots where his physical strengths are maximized, then he's got a shot to contribute. But if they try to do too much too fast, if they overload him with responsibilities, then he's going to fail. And here's what's really got me curious. How do the other receivers react to Burks getting elevated? Olamide Zacchaeus has been playing well. Dyami Brown has had his moments. Jahan Dotson is trying to find consistency. Now you bring in a former first-rounder who might take snaps away from them. How do you manage that locker room dynamic? I ask you now, is it fair to those guys who've been grinding all season, who've been putting in the work, that a newcomer suddenly gets the spotlight? From a team perspective, you've got to put the best players on the field. But from a human perspective, I can understand if there's some resentment. But here's what all this tells me. Washington is desperate for help in the wide receiver room. If they weren't, Burks would still be on the practice squad learning the system for a few weeks before getting called up. The fact that they're throwing him into the fire this fast tells me they either really believe he can help, or they simply don't have any other options. The truth is probably a mix of both. They believe in his talent, but they're also backed into a corner. And that puts Burks in a unique spot. He's got a chance to be a hero if he succeeds, but he's also carrying the weight of knowing the team needs him to succeed. I'm telling you this. I'll be watching Treylon Burks very closely this Sunday against Seattle. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm not expecting 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I want to see effort. I want to see him running his routes with purpose. I want to see him blocking when he doesn't have the ball. I want to see the little things that show he's committed to being part of this team. Because here's the truth. Talent has never been the issue with Burks. The issue has been consistency, health, and maybe mindset. If Washington can fix those things, if they can give him the confidence and the system he needs to succeed, then maybe, just maybe, this story has a happy ending. But if it doesn't work out, if Burks is still the same guy he was in Tennessee, then it's just another missed opportunity. Another what if in a league full of them. Do you think Treylon Burks can revive his career in Washington? Or is it too late for him to live up to that first-round promise? Commanders, let me break down what we just covered because these 3 stories are completely connected. Terry McLaurin likely out until December, the trade deadline hinging on one game, and Treylon Burks being thrown into the fire ahead of schedule. You see the pattern? All of this is a direct result of the injuries that have absolutely wrecked this roster. So now I ask you, do you think Peters should go all in at the trade deadline despite Terry's injury? Or should he play it safe and trust that guys like Burks can step up? And do you really believe this team can survive the next few weeks without its star receiver? Drop your answers in the comments because I want to know exactly what the Commanders Nation is thinking. And if you're as passionate about this team as I am, if you want deep, honest analysis on every move the Commanders make, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Because I guarantee you, in the next 48 hours, with the trade deadline closing in, we're going to have more breaking news. Hit that LIKE button if you think Peters should buy at the deadline. And subscribe if you think he should stand pat. Turn on the notification bell because you do not want to miss what's coming. This season is far from over, and we're going to be right here covering every moment, every decision, every snap. We're a family here, Commanders. And families stick together through the good and the bad. This is a tough moment. I won't lie to you. But if there's one thing I've learned from following this team for years, it's this. Never, ever underestimate the heart of a true Washington fan. And remember, hail to the Redskins.